Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of Business Innovators Radio. This is our special Business Networking Influencers podcast, and today I've got a very special guest with me, Mr. Eddie Solis of Empire Real Estate. Eddie has been a realtor for the last 2 years with a specialization in the military community in San Antonio, Texas. Eddie himself was, of course, in the military. He spent 8 years in the Air Force, and now he spends his time helping his fellow military veterans to find homes to buy and sell in the San Antonio and surrounding areas. Eddie, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me. I love that intro. You're making me feel like I'm about to come out the ring or something right now, hyping me up. I love it.
Eddie Solis. Okay, Eddie. So let's start with the basics, okay? Tell us about your real estate company, Empire Real Estate, and how you are specifically helping your clients and your friends.
So Empire Real Estate, we started off with just 3 members, and these 3 members, we had a goal. We said, hey, we want to grow this group here to build enough people with the knowledge of different expertise areas to help our clients. And for me, I deal mainly with the veteran community, the active military, and we have other one that specializes in the outside of San Antonio, the Spanish community, and we have another one that specializes in luxury. I feel like one person, he can't be jack of all trades. You have to have one individual that's really strong in one area. So that's like your go-to individual. So we make sure that we come together as a team and we're very unselfish to work. Hey, you know what? This client here will fit you better. And we pass off one another to whoever will fit that client better. Because ultimately, this is one of the biggest purchases that people are going to come across. So you want to make sure that you do them right by giving them the best experience from the beginning to end. And sometimes that means that you may not be that right client and right individual for that client.
Sure.
But we put the right person in front of each other.
Got it, man. I love it. Could you explain some of the benefits and advantages of buying and selling a home through Empire Real Estate and specifically through Eddie Solis?
When it comes to me, I like to tell people that, hey, I love for you to shop around other realtors, because when it comes to it, I just feel like I bring another energy level to where it's an excitement. I make sure people feel good about buying a house. Some people, to be honest, there's so many realtors that just in the game for less than a year. The average percentage is 87% of people drop out in their first year. And
Wow.
I'm in this for the long run. You know, I'm here to build relationships from beginning to end. And you're not just my client, you're becoming my friend. And the advantage is the experience that we have, especially for me in the military community, how I bought homes while I was in the military. So I've been through the experience. I know how it is being that first time home buyer, especially as a military client, all the way to hey, do I rent out my house? Do I sell it? I'm moving to a different base, or I'm getting out the military. What do I do? It's just that experience that comes through it. And a lot of people say, we have some realtors that say, well, I worked with military people my whole life, but they don't understand it because they never been in the shoes of an actual military people. And for all my military and vets, I mean, it's just a whole nother language that we talk about. We have that dry humor that if we say something, some people may be like, oh, that's offensive. And other people are like, no, that was funny. So it's just being able to be relatable. And that's one of the biggest things that we have.
Definitely, man. No, I agree with you 100%. And I see that. Okay, Eddie, what about this? We're in a little bit of a crazy market. People are hearing mixed messages. They're listening to different, sources of information. But you're an expert in this category, and we want to hear it directly from you. What do you feel are the biggest myths out there when it comes to buying and selling a home right now?
I love how you started that. We're hearing about different myths, because there's so many people, which is not wrong, but they're not educated enough. You have people that are only listening to their moms and dads, that they only bought one house their whole lifetime and they're still living in the house that they bought when they're young, or they're having that barbecue and Uncle Joe that's in debt $50,000, $70,000, but telling them, hey, this is not the right time. Look what happened last year. We had so many people that said, hey, you know what? I'm just going to wait out the market, back when we were at 2-3% interest rate. And now they're sitting at almost 7%. And they're still like, oh, I'm not sure to buy. The biggest thing is that you cannot predict, nobody can, of what the market's going to be like. You have to just jump on in. You got to ride that roller coaster, the highs and lows. If you look at statistically, the the real estate market has always bounced back and is always going up. So I tell people, look, the interest rates are high right now. Prices are high, but the market is starting to turn right now into a buyer's market. During the summertime, you had to go in $20,000, $30,000 over asking price. Sometimes we're not even seeing the home. And some people jumped into that pool because they thought it was going to keep going up, but it's starting to steady out. With that, people are like, hey, interest rates are still too high. I'm not going to buy. Okay, cool. I mean, that's fine. That's your opinion. If you want to wait it out, who knows, next year, maybe 9-10%. And then you could have been like, man, I could have got 7. So some of these people now, we tell them, buy the house now. And then if rates do drop, hopefully they will eventually, you can refinance down the road. If it keeps going up, at least you bought in at a good time before it went higher. I think there's a saying out there that people say is buy the house, don't buy the rate kind of thing. So
Sure.
You want to fall in love with the house. I mean, me, for an example, I bought a house last year and I'm already up like $80,000 to $100,000 in equity just because I just jumped in. I didn't listen to the naysayers and people saying like, oh, don't do it now. Like, you might as well jump in.
For sure. No, I appreciate that. And that type of clarity is exactly what helps people to have a better understanding and have more confidence, right? At the end of the day, people want that confidence to know what's going to be the best decision to make. Now, a myth is basically misinformation or misrepresentation of facts that's spread by the media or an industry. And that's where I think a lot of that comes from, right? Is different type of news outlets and what have you. But I want to ask you a separate question, which is more along the lines of a misconception. So a misconception is a mistaken belief or a misunderstanding held in the mind of an individual. Now, you may have touched on a little bit of that, but maybe just go a little bit deeper. So what are some common misconceptions that especially the military community might have about buying and selling a home right now?
So I love that one because so many people think they could only use their military benefits one time in their whole lifespan. So they say, well, I'm just going to wait to buy until I get out the military. And then I telling them, why are you doing that? I was like, well, I can only use it one time. I was like, no, that's incorrect. Like, have you realized, like, someone like me, I've used it 3 times already. And with that, I was able to build my portfolio I bought a house, and then when you're about to leave PCS or even buy another house in that same base that you're at, within a year, you can buy another house. And then you can buy another one and another one after a year. Just keep using it. And a lot of people just think they can only use it one time. And then they're afraid that, well, if I leave this house, if I leave in 2 years, what am I going to do with it? I was like, you have a great bad problem. You know what's going to end up happening if you rent that house out? The money that you would get from that house can help you pay for the following house. And they're like, oh, I can do that. I was like, yeah, you can have up to 2 at one point right now. And I was like, really? And then, yeah, I was like, it's just so many, especially while they're active in the military. This is one, I mean, I love the military from the experience that I've had, but they don't educate the individuals enough, especially in the beginning, because the first thing they do when they get out of the barracks or the dorms is they go and rent out an apartment. And that's one of the biggest mistakes because they spend a whole year throwing away money and then they got to pay first month, last month up front. And so they end up coming out. And at the end of the day, when it's time for their lease to end, sometimes they have to pay for like a cleaning deposit or something. So they're out money. They leave with no equity compared to that young kid that buys a home. If he's educated or he has a good supervisor that can lead him the right direction, he ends up not putting any money down, possibly not even paying 2 months out. So then, and at the very end, when he needs to leave, he's leaving with equity in the home and he's setting that young kid up for success. I got so lucky that I just happened to knew about this because before the military, I was in banking and someone always said, hey, the best thing you can do is buy land. Just keep buying land. And then along the way, I heard this great saying for all military members. And I say it to this day to them, and it hits it home for them, for military people. It says, you fought so hard and you defend for this country. Why not own a piece of that land that you defend? And that just blows their mind. They're like, yes, like what am I doing? Like I'm giving my whole life and time and sacrifice, and I don't even own a piece of it. And right. Let me get one now. And I was like, yeah, let's get it.
No, you're exactly right. And I think that is something that's worth repeating. Most likely, I'll bet that's something that you bring up often. And it's one of those things that a lot of military members probably just, don't even spend the time thinking about that. Right. But man, when you put it like that, it's like, golly, man, I do need to get my little piece of the American pie here that I worked so hard to defend. So, yeah, that's a really big, important distinction to make there. What about talk a little bit about fears, Eddie. There's all kinds of different things that are out there. We did touch a little bit on some of them with interest rates and the market being a little bit crazy, but there's a lot of different fears that home buyers have, even home sellers as well. So what are some of the more common ones that you see, both military and not?
So a fear that some of them that I come across is renting out their home. They're like, hey, if I buy a home, the people that move into it, they're going to ruin my house, and I don't know how to put someone in the house, and I don't know how to keep up with it. And then I tell them, like, you know what? I have a house in South Carolina right now. I live in Texas currently. I don't even see the house. I haven't seen the house like in 2 years. And the reason why is because I did my homework. I got a good property manager in there, and they take care of it for me. I have never once seen who lives in my actual home, and my checks are guaranteed. They come in my account every month. So if you find yourself a good property manager that takes care of your assets, you never have to worry about it, because if they're doing the right things in place, then you're good. And especially like insurance, a lot of people say, what if the house burns down, or what if the hurricane comes through? I was like, well, you have the insurance. You have your insurance that takes care of you. So that's a big myth, not myth, of fear, that people are scared of renting out their actual house.
Sure.
Going to first-time home buyers in general, the biggest thing, especially for military, they keep saying, I don't have good enough credit and I don't have enough money. And I was like, well, how do you know that? Who told you that? And they're like, well, so Uncle Joe or whatnot. I was like, what's your credit score now? And then they'll say like, oh, I have a high 600 or 700s. And I'm like, okay, and who told you that's not good enough? And like, well, I just didn't know. I was like, okay. I was like, well, let me walk you through it. Before I even say, let's go to look at houses, let me educate you first and tell you that you are in the right position credit-wise. And the next question would be, how much money do you make? How much do you have saved up? Some of them say, oh, I'm trying to save up $60,000, $70,000. And I said, why? I say, well, I heard you got to save a lot of money. I was like, well, you can keep saving, and then the market prices might keep going up, but you can buy right now. Especially if you're military members, you don't need to put anything down. You can move in right away. Now, yes, it will help you buy down your monthly payment, which is great. If that's your preference, that you want a low monthly, that's great. But the military itself, they have a thing called BAH. And what they do is they try to accommodate for the going rate in that area. So if you're in the military, they try to give you the amount of money that will match up for it. So you're kind of in where you still make enough money to be in that situation where you can pay your bills.
Eddie, can you share an example of how you've helped your clients and friends overcome these types of fears and these types of obstacles and help them succeed in buying and selling a home?
When it comes to selling their home, that's what you're saying, right? The selling. So if I sell my home now, how do I go into transition to my next home? I don't know how it's going to work out. Do I have to leave all my stuff there? Who do I hire? Do I go through a company that I won't say their names, but go through online and just sell it through there? Because I heard it's so much hassle-free. It is hassle-free, because to be honest, I sold one of my houses through one of them. And one of the great things was convenience. It sold within 2 days. Like I literally didn't have to show nobody a house, and I got my check a couple of weeks later. But the one thing they don't tell you about when you do that, it didn't sell for what it could have sold. And then they take out all these fees from it that I was like, wait a minute, you didn't tell me about all this. Like, yeah, well, this is for this, and that. So you got to read the fine print. But when you get a real estate agent to help you sell the house, they try to get you the top dollar for it. And people are like, no, a lot of people don't trust real estate agents. I think real estate agents are like one of the top 10 non-trusted people, if you look it up. But the reason why is because there's so many bad people that are just looking for that quick sell, and they forget about them. And you have to shop real estate agents. And a lot of people don't know that. They think they can just go to their first realtor they meet and like, all right, I'm going to use you. You can easily fire somebody on the spot. Like if I was with somebody and the relationship didn't work, I even tell them like, hey, you know what? I want you to have the best experience possible. And if I'm not the right person for you, just let me know, because I'd rather you enjoy this whole process. So you got to make sure that you have the right realtor in place, and you have the right lender also. That's a whole nother ball game. Because some people, they only apply for one lender. And I was like, you can apply, up to 3 to where we want to affect your credit score after you run the first one. Like, oh, I didn't know that. And they're like, why should I go to another lender? I was like, well, some of them might give you a better interest rate. Some of them may give you lower fees. Some of them may give you a higher amount, whatever, once again, preference to what you like.
Yeah, no, exactly. And those are really, really important points that you brought up there. Now, I want to know a little bit more about you, Eddie, and a little bit more about your backstory. So can you share with us what inspired you to become a real estate agent?
So when I was in the military, I had a job to where I was constantly flying all over the world. And when I was going to these different places, I just noticed all these different types of homes along the way. And at that time, I was just about to get out the dorms because you had to live in the dorms in the military for a little bit. And I saw these people paying a high amount for rent. And I'm like, I don't want a little box for that amount of money. And I was like, let me go buy my first home. Let me just go see what it's about. I went through the process. I bought it. And then my military, the loan people said, hey, when you're ready to buy your next home, let me know. And I was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I thought I was just kind of done at that time. And they said, no, like, you can buy another one possibly next year, if your family grows or whatever the case. So that started going to where on my own. I was just learning as I went on my own because my family told me, hey, you wait till you get out the military and you have a family, married, and then buy your house. And I was like, well, that just seems too long away. Like I'm living in now. I don't know what tomorrow comes. So I want to do now. So I started buying the process. And I seen the benefits. There's a military kind of hack thing program that they tell people like, hey, buy a house. And if you're not really in there all the time, put some people in it. And I did that. I was always going on mission. So it was a small house. It was a 3-bedroom, probably like 1,200 square feet. And I had a couple of friends that they're like, hey, I'm looking for a place to stay. Do you know anybody? I was like, hey, if you don't mind, like, I'll rent out a room to you. Matter of fact, you can have my master room because I'm hardly ever there. Because I started thinking like, you know what? If I put enough people in my house, that house is going to be free for me because they're going to pay for it. And sure enough, I ended up having in this small house, there was like 6 people at one point living in. And then I was even renting out the front space car lots because some people go overseas. I was hey, you can park your car here and charge you some amount of money. And that just started growing. Like this is easy money to come in. And then slowly one of my troops, he's like, hey, I noticed people stay at your house. Why do you do that? And then it just slowly trickled to, you know what, man? I was like, you should buy a house. And they're like, why? I don't know anything about buying a house. And slowly enough, I talked him into it. I told him the benefits of it. And he's like, yeah, I should. And I ended up talking almost 9 different individuals into buying a house instead of renting. And then I ended up becoming the guy in the unit to where, hey, if you ever think about buying a house or before you rent, move out the barracks, go talk to Eddie. Go talk to Sergeant Solis, and then he'll tell you about it first before you make that move. So then I was like, man, I'm giving away all this education, which at that time, you're in the military, you're helping out your brothers and sisters, so you love it. And I was like, as I was thinking about my transition out the military at that moment, I was like, man, this is so easy. Why don't I get paid for doing this? Why don't I get paid for selling houses? And at that time, just like everybody else watching shows on TV and they're showing how the realtors are making money. And I'm like, in my head, because I'm a competitor. I'm like, that person ain't doing nothing better than what I'm doing there. I was like, I can talk better than that guy. And most of all, I can help them better. I can help educate them because all these other people you see on TV, they're opening the doors, say, oh, you look nice, but you never hear them educating them and everything. And that's one of the biggest things I took away from the military. If you have to know your job to do your job before you do anything else special. That's a shout out to my supervisor, Tech Sergeant Glover. He told me before you can do any of the fun things here in the military, know your job. Read everything there is so that way nobody can come up to you and say, hey, and they ask you a question about your job and you don't know it. I want to be that guy that knows everything possible. If not, hey, I'll go find you that answer. But I want to be that guy that knows everything. And how that trickles down is so when people have a question, it shows that, hey, this guy's reliable. He knows what he's talking about. He has that energy. I'm going to use this individual. And sure enough, when I got out the military, I think half of the people that I helped so far are military members. And the reason why is because they feel trusted with me. They feel like he's been through it. He's bought 3 houses himself already, and he's helping other military members. So I'm going to use him compared to everyone else.
That's awesome, man. A big part of my whole entire message, my whole podcast, everything is about being that educator and advocate for the success of your client, right? Start with that first. And 9 times out of 10, people are going to choose you because they appreciate the fact that you took that time to educate them, just like you mentioned. It's a very important point of distinction because a lot of people their mind is more focused on making the sale. And the last thing they're really thinking about is first of all, I don't have much to educate on. And second of all, the only thing that I'm really thinking about is making money. And so what ends up happening is, that person gets put last in that whole equation, right? And that's why, your industry and a lot of other industries have a black eye, so to speak, with certain, representatives of that industry, because unfortunately, a lot of people are just very commission focused first and really could care less about educating, right? So Thank you for sharing that, because I think that is really important. I think the people who will even just consider you are going to appreciate that. Now, that's a perfect segue, because I have a couple of actual educator and advocate questions for you. So we're giving you the opportunity to continue to put that into action, your knowledge. The first question I have for you is this, under that premise: what's the most important question that the military community should ask themselves as they consider buying or selling a home right now?
Right now is, I get the question of, because they say, is it a good time to buy? And then I ask them, well, what are your plans? What's your futures? And like, what do you mean? I was like, well, how are you set up financially? And can you afford to buy a house? That, because some of these military members, they do live paycheck to paycheck. Because some of them, they have their own situations, their own debts, their own family members, kids and whatnot. And sometimes buying a house is just not for them. And that goes to the people on the outside as well. That's one of the baseline questions I say: how much money do you make? And it's not to judge you in any way. It's just to make sure that you're a good fit, because I want to set you up for financial growth all the way through, from beginning to end. Because if I put you in a house and you can't afford it in a year, 2 years down the road, it wasn't, hey, Eddie, the realtor put me in a great house. It's, no, Eddie, the realtor put me in debt, and he put me in too much of a big house that I could not afford. So for my military members, especially, they get married or they're at a position to where they're going to get married. So they go buy too much of a big house, and they're like, well, right now I'm making good pay. Well, that's great. You're making good pay, but where are you in your military career? Are you about to get out the military? Are you a year, 2 years out? Are you about to retire? And the reason why I tell them that is because you realize you may not get paid exactly how much money you're getting paid currently. Because when you get out, a lot of military members can't find a job. They think they can. They're like, oh no, I have all these expertise. But I mean, I'll be one to say, like, I have 2 degrees. And when I first got out, there was nobody hiring me, because as I was transitioning, I just put applications out there just to be on the safe side, to have a backup. But
Sure.
Nobody was calling me. And I was surprised, because like, man, I've been a manager at a bank. I have degrees. I have military experience, and nobody was calling. So I told them, like, let me make sure you're set up financially. Ask yourself where you're at. Do you have enough money saved to last if something goes wrong? Especially like COVID. When COVID happened, I mean, a lot of people, like, that was an eye opener. Like, am I in the right job? Are people really taking care of me, kind of thing? So making sure that you yourself are ready to buy a house. If you have the money coming in, if you feel that you're ready, then you go ahead and buy. If you're not buying because you're just scared of the unknown, like, I don't know what's going on, then you're wasting time, because you should have bought a house yesterday, because the way the rates are going, the prices, you got to dive in.
Right. That's awesome, man. That is really important info that you shared there. I got one more for you, and then we'll wrap up. What is the most important thing that the military community should consider when evaluating a real estate agent?
You want to make sure they're looking out for you. Some of them will give you incentive up front, because first thing that military members, they'll ask when they check out at a store, they'll say, hey, is there any military discount? Even to this day, also, hey, is there a veteran discount? Just because you sacrifice so much, and if you're not saying that, then you should probably start taking advantage of it, because without you even knowing, you go out and you take away time from your family that you had, whether it's 4 years or 20 years. It's a lot of time that you sacrifice, so you might as well take advantage of it. So when you go into your realtor, hey, is there any incentives for me, using you? And why should I use you? You are the person interviewing them. Make sure they're a good fit for you. Make sure they're not just if you're getting a vibe, they're just trying to make you a quick sell or push you into a big house. Pump the brakes. Let me go shop around. Especially, there's some realtors that they'll say, hey, what are you looking for? And then they'll give them a whole description, and they go far left, and they end up taking them to a house that's $50,000 to $100,000 more than what they said. Or it's a house that just doesn't fit them at all. And at that point, you're knowing, like, is this realtor just trying to push a house on me and is trying to get a sale quick? And maybe they're getting incentives from that individual for me to sell it. Because, I mean, once again, this goes back to, realtors not being trusted. Some realtors have teams that have houses for sale, and they say, hey, if you sell this house for me, I'll give you an extra bonus of this and that. The client has no idea that what's going on. And that one individual can keep pushing that one house, and to the point, like, hey man, like, I don't know, times I got to tell you, I don't want this house. And I've actually gained a client, and I don't want to say that I stole this person, But they called me and they said, hey, I see your ads online and I see you're talking about friendship first and whatnot. And they started asking me all these questions and they said, well, that's not what my agent told me. My agent told me this or that. And I was like, look, before I take you out, let it be transparent. Tell your other real estate agent that you're done with them and you want to move on, because I don't want to cross any person. But at the same time, I won't have you sign nothing with me. Come out with me. Let me show you some houses. And if you like what's going on, then we can move forward. And when I say that, they're like, wait a minute, you're going to take me out showing houses and I'm not able to sign nothing to be with you? I was like, no, because if you like me, you do business with me. If not, at least you leave at least a little educated to allow you can make the right decision for the next one. Because I believe in the giver's gain mentality. And that goes back to me being my BNI networking group that I'm in, that if one day, if you keep giving and giving, it's going to be returned. And even if that individual doesn't use me, well, maybe down the road, she may like, you know what, that one agent was good. That person's good for my sister or my brother. He can walk them through hand in hand to get the job done. So it's just paying it forward kind of thing.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate all the information that you shared today. Everything was really helpful, really informative. How can someone find out more about Eddie Solis and Empire Real Estate if they want to reach you?
So I tell people, just give me a call. I listen to everybody. Just give me a call at 210-683-8292. That's my personal cell. Call me. Let's talk about it. If you have any questions, I love educating people. I take the time, whether you're buying, selling, renting. I take the time to talk to every individual. Because once again, I'm in the long game. It ain't about short now. It ain't just, hey, let me go buy a house now. Like if it means that you're not going to buy a house to a year, but if I can educate you and put you on game to know what to do when that time comes up, I'm all for it. Because at the end of the day, like we're going to end up being friends. You're going to have a long-term agent here that not just your first house, but your second house. And we may buy a couple of rentals and investments down the way. I'll be here from beginning to end.
That's awesome, man. Thank you for joining us today, Eddie. Appreciate you.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.